They say every house has secrets, but some secrets are meant to stay buried. For decades, this old Victorian home stood quiet at the edge of town, its windows like dark eyes watching everyone who passed. People whispered that strange things happened there, objects moving on their own, voices echoing from below the floorboards. And then, there was the basement. No one went down there, not the owners, not even the workers who tried to renovate it. Because every time someone stepped near that heavy wooden door, they said they heard something. A faint knocking, a whisper, a breath that wasn't their own. But now, for the first time in years, someone is finally going in. And what they find beneath that creaking floor changes everything. Chapter 1: The House at the Edge of Town. There's something different about this house. Not because it's old or creaky or draped in ivy. Plenty of homes fit that description. No. This one feels different. You don't just see it, you sense it. It stands alone at the far edge of Millbrook, a quiet town where everyone knows everyone. And everyone knows not to go near this place. Its once white paint has long faded into a tired gray. The windows, boarded up from the inside. And yet, on certain nights, locals swear they've seen a faint light flicker behind the cracks. Like someone's walking through with a candle. Some call it the Wainwright House, named after the family who built it nearly a century ago. Others call it something else entirely, the Breathing House, because if you stand close enough, they say you can hear it exhale. For years, kids dared each other to run up and touch the front door. Most didn't make it past the rusted gate. Those who did said it felt warm, alive somehow. But every legend has a beginning. And before we can understand what hides beneath that basement floor, we have to go back to the town, the family, and the night everything changed. Chapter 2: A Town's Dark Memory. Millbrook was the kind of town where time seemed to move slower, where stories outlived the people who told them. And the one story no one ever forgot was about the Wainwright House. Older residents still remember the whispers, the late-night search parties, the day the family simply vanished. No signs of struggle, no footprints leading away, just an empty home and a basement door bolted shut from the outside. Some say the father, Harold Wainwright, was an inventor. Others said a madman. He was known to work late into the night, building strange devices in his workshop below the house. When he stopped showing up in town, people assumed he'd left. But then, the noises started. Neighbors reported screams echoing through the ground, like something alive was trapped beneath. One man swore he saw light seeping up through the soil, pulsing like a heartbeat. Eventually, people stopped asking questions. The house was boarded up, sold and resold, but never lived in. Each new owner left within weeks. Some claimed the basement door opened on its own. Others refused to talk about it at all. Over the years, Millbrook's quiet streets moved on. But not everyone forgot. Because deep down, the town knew. Some ghosts don't fade. Chapter 3: The Family Who Vanished. The Wainwrights were once seen as the perfect family. Harold, the ambitious inventor. Margaret, his elegant wife who taught music to local children. And their daughter Lily, barely 8 years old when everything changed. In the photos that remain, they look ordinary. Smiling. Content. But as townsfolk would later recall, there was always something off about the house after Harold began his project. He'd ordered shipments of strange materials, heavy metals, copper wiring, glass tubing, things no one in Millbrook could identify. The deliveries always went straight to the basement. Then came the night of the storm. The power across town flickered, but for hours, the Wainwright house glowed. A red light, steady, unnatural, poured from the cracks in its windows. The next morning, the sheriff arrived to find the front door wide open and silence inside. Dinner plates were still set on the table. Margaret's violin lay on the couch, one string broken. Upstairs, Lily's room was untouched, her favorite doll sitting neatly on the bed. But in the basement, the door was sealed shut, not locked, sealed. No one dared break it open. Not the sheriff, not the neighbors. The report was quietly filed away. And from that moment on, the Wainwrights were no longer a family, they were a legend. Chapter 4: The Door That Wouldn't Stay Shut. The basement door was unlike anything else in the house. Solid oak, iron hinges, and a lock so old it seemed to belong to another time. When investigators first found it sealed, they assumed it had been boarded for safety. But that assumption didn't last long. Years later, when the property changed hands for the first time, the new owner, a retired postman named Walter Briggs, decided to unseal the basement. He said it felt wrong to live in a house with a part of it hidden. So one quiet afternoon he pried off the boards. That's when the knocking began. Walter swore it started as soon as the last nail came free, slow, deliberate taps from the other side. He froze, listening, heart pounding in his throat. Then came a whisper, faint, almost playful. He never opened the door. Instead, he nailed it shut again and left the house that very night. When locals came to check, they found the boards back in place. But the nails were bent outward, as if pushed from inside. Since then, no one's been able to keep that door closed for long. Every time someone tries, the lock rusts through, the boards come loose, or the hinges simply give way. It's as if something down there refuses to be forgotten. Chapter 5: The Man Who Tried to Renovate. It was 1997 when a contractor named Tom Hensley bought the old Wainwright house. He wasn't from Millbrook, just a man looking for cheap property to flip. Locals warned him, of course, but Tom wasn't the superstitious type. "It's just a house," he laughed. "Wood, nails, and a little bad wiring." For the first few days, everything went smoothly. He replaced the windows, stripped the wallpaper, and fixed the roof. But when it came time to clear the basement, his workers refused to enter. They said the air down there felt thick, heavy, like standing underwater. So Tom went down himself. He later described what he saw as wrong. The basement floor was uneven, with strange circular burn marks etched into the concrete. In one corner, he found an old lantern still filled with melted wax, and next to it, a child's shoe. That night, he heard movement below, slow, dragging footsteps pacing under his bedroom. Thinking it was an animal, he grabbed a flashlight and headed down. But when he opened the basement door, every tool he'd left on the workbench was on the floor, arranged in a perfect circle. The next morning, Tom packed up his truck and drove out of town. He never came back for his things. The renovation stopped, and the house waited, once again, in silence. Chapter 6: The Skeptics Arrive. Every legend eventually attracts the curious, and for the Wainwright house, that moment came when a group of paranormal investigators arrived from out of state. They called themselves Spectre Seekers, a small team of documentarians who claimed to debunk ghost stories with science. They'd heard all the rumors, the whispers, the lights, the missing family. To them, it was the perfect project, a haunted hoax, ready to be exposed. The leader, Evan Cross, was a former electrical engineer turned investigator. His motto was simple: there's always an explanation. When they arrived, the air around the house felt unnaturally still. Birds avoided the trees. Even the wind seemed to pause near the property line. The team laughed it off, unloading their cameras and motion sensors, assuring each other it was just nerves. Inside, the floors groaned beneath their boots, dust swirling in the sunlight like smoke. The basement door, still scarred with old nails and rust, loomed at the end of the hallway. They decided to camp inside overnight, one team upstairs, one near the basement. Evan joked on camera, "If there's a ghost down there, it better sign a release form." But as night fell and the recording lights blinked red, something began responding. Not in words, but in rhythm. 3 slow knocks, then silence. The skeptics were about to learn that not every story dies with disbelief. Chapter 7: Setting up the cameras. The next morning, the Spectre Seekers went into full preparation mode. Wires, infrared lights, EMF detectors, they turned the Wainwright house into a maze of blinking equipment. Each camera was placed with precision. One in the parlor, one in Lily's old bedroom, and 2 near the basement door. Evan wanted every angle covered. "If anything moves, we'll catch it," he said confidently. But beneath his calm tone, the rest of the team could feel the unease. The house had a way of getting under their skin, making even the smallest sound feel amplified. Their tech specialist, Mara, noticed something odd. Every time she tried to test the basement camera, the feed glitched. The screen filled with static, but not random static. It looked like shapes, shadows forming, then dissolving. Probably interference, Evan muttered, though his eyes lingered a second too long on the screen. By sunset, the house was ready. They set up sleeping bags in the living room and began their overnight watch. Hours passed quietly, until 2:47 a.m. A faint creak came from the hallway. The camera pointed at the basement door flickered. Then, clear as day, the door handle turned once, twice before stopping. Everyone froze. The footage was rolling. And for the first time, Evan didn't have a clever explanation. Chapter 8, The First Descent. No one spoke for a full minute after that doorknob turned. The only sound was the faint mechanical whir of their cameras still recording. Evan, trying to steady his voice, finally said, "All right, we check it out." They approached the basement door together, their flashlights cutting narrow tunnels through the dark. Mara reached for the knob, but the moment her hand touched the cold metal, every light in the house flickered at once. The air seemed to thicken, pressing against their lungs. "Power surge," Evan muttered, though even he didn't sound convinced. With a deep breath, he unlatched the door and pushed it open. The smell hit them first, damp earth and something metallic like old blood and rust. The staircase groaned beneath their weight as they descended, one creak at a time. At the bottom, their lights swept across the room. Stone walls, tools, dust. Nothing unusual at first glance. But then, in the far corner, they found a wooden table covered in jars, dozens of them, filled with cloudy liquid and what looked like hair. "Are we rolling?" Mara whispered. "Always," Evan replied. But when they checked the camera later, the footage of that moment was gone, replaced by a solid gray screen, with only one faint sound behind it. A single breath. Chapter 9, The Static and the Whisper. Back upstairs, the team replayed their footage, and that's when they heard it. Beneath the hum of static, faint but undeniable, came a whisper. A woman's voice. The words were slurred, almost wet, but clear enough to make the hair on the back of their necks rise. "Don't let it out." Evan froze. Did anyone say that during filming? No one had. Mara scrubbed the audio back and forth, isolating the voice. It wasn't an echo. It wasn't interference. It was something inside the recording. Then all four monitors began glitching at once. Lines streaked across the screens, forming strange patterns, circles within circles, intersecting at odd angles. It almost looked like a design. "Maybe electromagnetic interference," Evan said, but his voice wavered. The pattern pulsed, as if syncing with their breathing. And beneath it, the whisper came again, louder this time. "Don't let it out." The basement camera went black. For a moment, total silence filled the room. And then, over the team's radio feed, came the faint sound of scraping, like metal dragged across stone. Evan turned toward the basement door. It was closed again. No one had touched it. That was when they realized. The knocking hadn't stopped. It had only learned to whisper. Chapter 10, The Cold Spot. The next morning, the team gathered their courage and went back down. The basement looked untouched, but the air felt different. Heavier, colder. Every breath came out in pale mist, even though the thermostat upstairs read 70 degrees. Mara held out her thermometer. 43, she said quietly. The temperature was dropping the deeper they went. Evan ran his hand along the wall and pulled it back instantly. "It's freezing," he muttered, "like touching ice." Then, without warning, one of the EMF detectors spiked. A shrill beep echoed off the stone. The lights on the device blinked wildly, then stopped, pointing directly at a corner where nothing stood. "Maybe a draft?" one of them suggested. But there were no vents, no open cracks, no airflow of any kind. The cold spot hung in midair like an invisible presence. Mara whispered, "It feels like it's breathing." She wasn't wrong. The chill seemed to pulse, expanding and retracting, as if the basement itself was alive. Then the camera she held began to shake, not from her hand, but as if something was pushing against it. And through the static on her mic came a sound they all heard at once. A slow inhale. Then a soft, deliberate exhale. It wasn't the wind. It was something standing right between them. Chapter 11, The Hidden Room. After that night, the team was rattled, but Evan wasn't ready to give up. Every house has a reason for its legends, he said. We just haven't found this one's yet. So they started scanning the basement walls, searching for hollow spaces or hidden doors. It didn't take long. Behind a row of old shelving, Mara's infrared camera picked up an outline, a rectangular void where solid wall should have been. Evan grabbed a crowbar, hesitated, then swung. The plaster crumbled easily, revealing rotted boards behind it. And behind those boards, a doorway. The opening led into a narrow, windowless room, barely 6 feet across. The walls were lined with symbols carved into the stone, their shapes looping and twisting like runes. In the center of the floor sat a circle of burnt candle wax and ash. Someone's been here, Mara whispered. Evan shook his head. No. This looks old. Decades old. Then they noticed something else. A small metal box tucked inside the wall cavity. Inside it was a book, wrapped in cloth blackened with soot. When Mara unwrapped it, the cover bore a single word, written in shaky handwriting, Lily. The basement door upstairs creaked open on its own. And for the first time, Evan didn't look curious. He looked afraid. Chapter 12, The Journal. They carried the book upstairs, setting it gently on the kitchen table beneath a single dim bulb. The pages were fragile, edges curled with age. The ink faded to a dull brown. On the first page, a child's handwriting, uneven, innocent, spelled out, Lily Wainwright. It began like any little girl's diary. Entries about her toys, her mother's music lessons, her father working late in the basement. But the tone shifted halfway through. The writing became rushed, jagged. She wrote about the voices under the floor, about how her father said he was talking to light. In one entry, Lily described sneaking downstairs at night and seeing her father standing inside a circle of candles, wires connected to glass jars that glowed faintly blue. She said he wasn't speaking English anymore, just whispering sounds that hurt to hear. The final entry was only 3 lines. Mommy said don't go down there again. But Daddy says the light is hungry. Tomorrow we feed it. Mara's hand trembled as she turned the page, but there were no more entries, just a dark fingerprint smeared across the paper. Outside, thunder rumbled, though no storm had been forecast. And down in the basement, the cameras flickered back to life on their own. Chapter 13, The Experiment. By now, the Spectre Seekers had more questions than answers. Evan, though visibly shaken, insisted on pushing forward. If Harold Wainwright was performing experiments, he said, we need to know what he was trying to do. Using Lily's journal as a guide, the team decided to recreate part of Harold's setup, not to summon anything, but to test if his equipment caused electromagnetic phenomena that could explain the haunting. They gathered copper wire, old bulbs, and a generator. Mara rebuilt a crude version of what Lily had described. A circle of light, powered by electricity, surrounded by glass jars. When they switched it on, the bulbs flickered, then began to glow with an eerie blue hue, exactly as Lily had written. The air vibrated. The static on their monitors surged, and then the temperature dropped again. The basement filled with a low hum, almost like a voice beneath the floor. The generator sputtered. Then one of the jars shattered, spraying glass across the room. The hum turned into a pulse, rhythmic, deliberate, alive. Evan shouted, "Turn it off!" But Mara's hand froze over the switch. Her eyes were wide, unfocused. The blue light reflected in her pupils like fire. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the power cut out. Total silence. Total darkness. And from somewhere in that dark came a single whisper. You woke it. Chapter 14, The Voice Returns. When the lights flickered back on, Mara was trembling. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "It spoke to me." The others stared, unsure whether to comfort her or question her. Evan finally asked, "What did it say?" She hesitated. "It said, my name." They played back the audio from the basement, hoping to find proof or peace of mind. But what they heard was worse. Beneath the generator's dying hum was a clear, drawn-out whisper, "Mara," followed by a child's faint giggle. Mara covered her ears, shaking her head. "That's not me. That's not possible." From that moment, strange things began happening. Cameras turned on by themselves. Doors creaked open in empty rooms. One night, while reviewing footage, Evan noticed something else. A shadow, standing directly behind Mara in multiple frames. It didn't move when she did. It didn't belong to anyone in the room. And then, during a midnight watch, the radio crackled to life. Static filled the air. Then a voice broke through, soft, pleading. "Please, don't let him out." The signal cut instantly. Evan looked at Mara. Her face had gone pale. "It's the same voice from the recording," she whispered. But this time, it wasn't just on tape. Something in the house wasn't repeating the past anymore. It was responding. Chapter 15, The Power Cut. It happened 3 nights later. The air outside was still, the moon hidden behind thick clouds. The team was reviewing footage in the living room when, without warning, every light in the house went black. The generator had shut down. Even their backup batteries refused to power on. Only the camera's night vision mode remained, bathing the room in grainy green shadows. "Stay calm," Evan said, though his voice betrayed him. "Check the breakers." Mara and another investigator, Jonas, grabbed flashlights and made their way toward the basement. The beams cut through the darkness like narrow blades. Halfway down the stairs, Jonas stopped. "Do you hear that?" It was faint. A soft humming, almost like a tune. A lullaby. The same one Margaret Wainwright used to play on her violin, according to old newspaper clippings. Then came a loud clang. Something metallic fell in the dark, followed by a gasp. Mara's flashlight hit the floor and rolled, its beam landing on the basement wall, where new scratches had appeared. Long, deep, and still fresh. Jonas whispered, "Evan, the marks are moving." Before he could finish, the door above them slammed shut with enough force to shake the frame. The house had gone silent again. But this time, they weren't alone in the dark. Chapter 16, The Scratches on the Wall. When Evan finally forced the basement door open, his flashlight beam caught the dust in midair, thick, swirling, almost like smoke. The others were huddled by the stairs, pale and shaking. On the far wall, the scratches were clear now. Deep grooves carved into stone, not plaster. They looked like claw marks, long, deliberate, in groups of 3. But when Mara brushed her hand over them, she realized something worse. "These aren't random," she whispered. "They're letters." Under the trembling light, the pattern began to make sense. A name, Lily, etched again and again into the stone, as if someone or something had been trying to write from the inside. Suddenly, the EMF reader spiked. A piercing tone filled the room, and a cold wind burst from nowhere, extinguishing their lights. The team screamed as a single bulb hanging from the ceiling flickered back on, swinging violently as if struck. In its stuttering light, the scratches began to spread. Fresh lines tearing across the surface, dust falling in tiny avalanches. Mara dropped to her knees. "It's still here," she cried. "It's trying to get out." Evan stared, frozen. The marks stopped abruptly, inches from the floor, forming one final word, "Stay." Then the bulb shattered, plunging them into darkness once more. Chapter 17, The Basement Shifts. At first, they thought it was an earthquake. The floor trembled softly under their feet, dust raining down from the beams above. But as the seconds passed, the shaking didn't stop. It moved, like something alive, shifting beneath the foundation. Evan grabbed the wall for balance. "Everyone out now," he shouted. But when they turned toward the staircase, it wasn't there. The steps that had always led upward now seemed to stretch into the dark, bending at an impossible angle, disappearing into shadow. Mara's voice cracked. "This isn't real. It can't be real." Their cameras flickered wildly. Every screen showed something different. One displayed static, another showed footage from hours earlier, and one showed them right now but from a corner of the room that didn't exist. Jonas tried to find the door, running his hands along the wall. His fingers hit cold stone where the exit should have been. "It's changing," he whispered. "The whole room's changing." Then came the sound, slow footsteps echoing across the floor, though no one was moving. The temperature plummeted again. Their breath hung like fog. And from the far corner of the basement, a child's voice broke the silence. "You shouldn't have opened it." The walls groaned, the floor heaved, and for the first time the Wainwright house didn't just feel alive. It was alive. Chapter 18, The Hidden Truth. When the shaking finally stopped, the basement fell into a suffocating silence. Dust floated through the air like ash after a fire. The team barely dared to breathe. Then, from beneath the debris, Evan noticed something. A faint outline beneath the cracked cement floor. He brushed the surface with his sleeve. It was metal, a small, square plate, half buried and rusted around the edges. A latch. Mara crouched beside him, her voice trembling. "You think it's a hatch?" Evan didn't answer. He just pulled. The rusted metal shrieked open, releasing a gust of foul, stagnant air and a sound. Not quite a scream, not quite a sigh. Something in between. Below the hatch was a tunnel. Narrow, dark, lined with wood and dirt. At the edge of the opening, they found old fragments of fabric. A child's dress, faded and torn. Jonas pointed to the wall beside the tunnel. "Look at that." Carved into the wood were dozens of tally marks. Weeks, maybe months, maybe years. And below them, a message etched in a shaky hand. "Still here. Don't forget me." Mara covered her mouth. "Lily." Evan's face went pale. "This isn't just a haunting," he said quietly. "It's a grave." The basement wasn't hiding a ghost. It was guarding a secret the family had tried to bury forever. Chapter 19, The Tunnel Beneath. The tunnel yawned open like the mouth of something ancient, waiting. Evan aimed his flashlight down the narrow shaft, but the beam vanished into blackness after just a few feet. The air that drifted out was damp, heavy, the kind that clung to your lungs. Jonas tied a rope around his waist. "If it's a passage, someone has to go first," he said. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. He lowered himself slowly, boots scraping against the dirt wall, until his feet hit the ground below. "I'm in," he called out. "It goes deeper." One by one they followed. The space was tight, barely tall enough to stand. Wooden beams held up the ceiling, but some were splintered, rotted through. The smell was awful, a mix of mold and something faintly metallic. As they moved forward, their lights caught fragments along the ground. A rusted lantern, a small doll with one eye missing, and further in a photograph. It was old, the edges crumbling. A family portrait, the Wainwrights, and in the center, the little girl they'd seen in the footage, Lily. But there was something strange about it. Behind Lily, barely visible, was a shadow. A human shape, but taller, distorted, faceless. Mara's whisper broke the silence. She wasn't down here alone. And from somewhere ahead, in the darkness, came a soft hum. A lullaby. Chapter 20, The Lullaby in the Dark. The sound was faint at first. A soft melody carried through the damp air. It didn't echo. It breathed, as though the tunnel itself was singing. Evan raised his hand for silence. No one moved. The hum grew louder, clearer. It was a lullaby. Slow, gentle, the kind a mother might sing to her child. But something about it was wrong. Every few notes, the tune fractured, twisting into something broken and mournful. Mara's flashlight flickered as she whispered, "It's coming from ahead." They followed the sound through a curve in the tunnel, stepping carefully over warped boards. The walls seemed to pulse faintly, as if reacting to the song. When they finally turned the corner, the light caught something that froze them all. A rocking chair. It sat in the middle of a small chamber carved out of earth, swaying back and forth with a slow, rhythmic creak. On it lay the remains of a doll, its head cracked open, a small music box turning inside its chest, the source of the lullaby. Then, from the darkness behind the chair, two eyes blinked open. They weren't glowing. They were reflecting their light, as if something was watching them, just beyond reach. The lullaby stopped. A child's whisper followed. She made me stay. Chapter 21, The Mother's Secret. The air turned colder, thick, almost unbreathable. The team's lights wavered, painting the dirt walls in trembling shadows. Evan stepped forward, voice low. Who made you stay? For a moment, nothing. Then, the faint sound of weeping echoed through the tunnel. Not a child's cry, a woman's. Soft, broken, filled with guilt. From the corner of the chamber, a figure began to take shape. A woman in a torn dress, hair cascading over her face. Her hands trembled as she reached toward the rocking chair. Mara whispered, "That's Mrs. Wainwright." The spirit turned slowly toward them. Her face was pale, streaked with dirt and tears, eyes hollow. "I told her to hide," she whispered, voice trembling. "They were coming for us. I told her I'd come back." Evan's throat tightened. "You sealed her in?" The woman nodded, barely. "I thought I'd save her. But when the fire came, I couldn't get back down." A silence heavier than grief filled the tunnel. Then, from behind the chair, the small figure of a child appeared, Lily. She reached for the woman's hand, eyes wide and unblinking. But when their fingers met, both forms flickered. The air rippled with energy, and the rocking chair stopped moving. Jonas whispered, "They're not haunting this place. They're trapped in it." Chapter 22, The Fire That Never Died. The tunnel walls began to glow faintly, as if the dirt itself remembered. The air shimmered with heat, even though the temperature had dropped moments earlier. A low roar filled their ears, not from outside, but from within the walls. Evan turned in a slow circle. "You hear that?" Before anyone could answer, the light from their flashlights warped, replaced by a flickering orange hue. Flames licked the air, spreading across the earthen walls without burning them. The team was surrounded by the memory of a fire. Through the haze they could see it, the house above years ago collapsing in on itself. And amid the chaos, Mrs. Wainwright screaming Lily's name, pounding on the basement door as smoke poured around her. Mara clutched her camera. It's showing us what happened." Then Lily's voice echoed through the blaze. Mama? "It's dark." The image rippled. The mother's figure turned, her face contorted in terror, reaching for a door that would never open. And just like that, the fire vanished. The heat faded. Only the smell of smoke remained. Evan whispered, almost to himself, "This house never stopped burning. It's been reliving that night, over and over." Jonas looked toward the tunnel's exit. Then we're inside the memory, and from somewhere above them, faint and distant, came the creak of the basement door closing again. Chapter 23, The Escape Attempt. The sound of the basement door slamming shut echoed down the tunnel like a gunshot. Evan spun toward the entrance. That was upstairs. The doors closing. They ran. The narrow tunnel seemed tighter now, the walls pressing closer with every step. Their flashlights cut through clouds of dust as roots and boards snapped beneath their boots. The air grew colder, sharper. Jonas reached the rope first and started climbing, hands trembling, breath ragged. But as he neared the top, his body jerked violently. He froze midair, eyes wide. "Something's got me," he screamed. Evan shone his light upward, nothing there. Just his friend dangling, feet kicking. And then, slowly, Jonas was yanked back down. Mara grabbed his arm and pulled with everything she had. "Don't you let go." With a final heave, Jonas broke free, crashing onto the dirt floor. His sleeve was shredded, deep scratches across his arm, like claws. Above them, the ceiling groaned. Cracks split across the wood, spilling earth. The tunnel was collapsing. "Move!" Evan shouted. They scrambled up the rope together, bursting through the hatch into the basement. The air was thick with dust, the room shaking violently. But when they looked around, everything was different. The walls were clean, the furniture untouched, the dust gone. They weren't in the same basement anymore. Chapter 24, The Time Trap. The silence that followed was unbearable. The team stood frozen, flashlights cutting across a basement that looked brand new. The walls gleamed with fresh paint. The floor was spotless, cobwebs and rot gone. Mara's voice broke first. This is impossible. Footsteps echoed from above. Slow, deliberate. The kind that creak only in old houses, except this one wasn't old anymore. Evan turned toward the staircase. We're not in our time. They climbed cautiously, emerging into a living room frozen in the past, the year 1923, by the look of the photographs. A fireplace burned low. A clock ticked steadily. And on the couch sat the Wainwright family. Alive. Mrs. Wainwright looked up, eyes red, hands gripping Lily's shoulders. "Who are you?" she whispered. But the team couldn't answer. The air shimmered, the edges of the room blurring like a dream dissolving. Jonas checked his camera. It wasn't recording. Nothing was. The child stood slowly, stepping toward Evan. "You came to help," she said softly. "But it's too late." The fire in the hearth roared suddenly higher. The walls began to shake, and the smell of smoke filled their lungs again. Mara screamed. "We're back in the night of the fire." Evan grabbed her arm. "Then we find the door or we burn with them." The house had pulled them into its last memory, and it wasn't letting go. Chapter 25, The Last Door. The fire was everywhere now, crawling up the walls, licking across the ceiling. Smoke twisted through the hallways, black and suffocating. The house screamed, its beams cracking like bones. Evan dragged Mara toward the staircase, coughing. "We have to find the exit. The real one." But every door led them back to the same hallway, endless, looping, burning. Jonas stumbled behind them, clutching the camera to his chest even as the lens melted in the heat. Then Lily appeared, standing calmly in the center of the flames. Her eyes weren't scared anymore. They were pleading. She pointed toward the old basement door. "It's the only way out." Without hesitation, Evan kicked it open. Beyond was darkness, cool, untouched by fire. The three of them dove through. The moment they crossed the threshold, the world exploded into silence. No fire. No smoke. Just the cold, empty basement, as it had been when they first arrived. Jonas fell to his knees, gasping. "We're out, right?" But on the wall behind them, the fresh scratches were back. Deeper this time. "Lily, Lily, Lily." And beneath them, one final line. "Thank you for letting me go." The lights flickered once, twice, then the power cut. When the authorities found their footage days later, it ended with a single frame, the basement door slowly closing.